Hey everybody, welcome to DBS Films Podcast. My name is Kellen. With me as always is my brother Brendan. Together we make movies with DBS Films. Today's episode going into part 2 of Five Nights at Freddy's and why horror movies are doing so well in 2023. As always, be sure to take a look at our movies online. Horror in the Forest is now out. If you can go ahead and watch and review it, it means the world to us. So that will be a huge thank you. As always, be sure to take a look at our Discord channel online because we make movies for our fans with our fans. So if you ever want to be part of the movie making process, that is the place to be. So we kind of mentioned overall review of the movie, how it kind of set up, how it works with the communities, all of that jazz in the first episode. This episode, we really want to kind of talk a little bit about how IPs are being made, and specifically how IPs more and more are going to be made around communities. And I think you kind of had a pretty good segue with it before we ended that last episode, which is kind of talking a little bit about Taylor Swift as well, too. So I think what we're seeing now is a branch away from the traditional IP, and more so you're seeing, we've seen video game IPs. We've seen, if you really think about it, superhero IP was kind of something that you drew from, existing content out there and you tapped into those communities. So I guess this really is going to be an episode about why it makes sense to tap into communities, because again, you have so much competition for people to just watch whatever you're making. Having a community that is already interested is really such a massive benefit. And that is one of the massive reasons why we are doing the model that we're doing right now of building our own community. So do you want to kind of talk about in the sense of how, superhero movies, Taylor Swift, Five Nights at Freddy's, really anything that's pulling into a community and then creating movies is having attraction of bringing people into it. Barbie, toys, Super Mario, another game, all of these movies with communities are doing really well if they can successfully tap into said community.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a safe play. I mean, you already know, like, people who like Barbie are probably going to go see Barbie. People who like Five Nights at Freddy's probably going to go see Nights at Freddy's. So it's smart. It's an easy decision to kind of greenlight these movies when you know that as long as you can pull it off, you can market it, you can market it properly, and you can make a good movie that you're going to probably get your money back. It's less of a risk, and if you're looking at it from top line producer, or the execs who have to greenlight this stuff, is it easier to greenlight Five Nights at Freddy's or just some new movie that from a first time director? It's just easier to kind of do this stuff. I mean, when we look at what movies we're going to film for the next year, I kind of have to look around and what's easier for me to greenlight something like The Murder House and Girl in Cabin 14, movies that we've done before that have worked really well, that the community has responded really well to, or something brand new, a new IP. So I can see how it is, and we do it on just a smaller scale. And obviously, there's going to be more people involved in these process at the higher level. But I think it's anything that you can do that kind of gives you like, hey, if we kind of pull this off, we have a better chance of success because there's a community, there's people who like this stuff, and if we can make it right, they will show up.
Exactly that. And I think another thing I wanted to hop into now is we are seeing, I think, a shift away from the legacy studios a little bit that are having some issues. We've had some bigger flops, some Indiana Joneses, some other ones out there that have not been able, or they've basically run out of steam with the community, or they've lost it. And I think, as we've kind of mentioned, really tapping into the horror market is one that there is kind of a much deeper well to it. And, again, I think I want to shout out horror communities and all of our horror friends out there. We've made a lot of horror friends just by existing, not even really actively kind of doing much other than just kind of posting our stuff out there. And people have reached out to us. Again, we have our Discord community now, but, we have other Discords, again, shout out to the Nightclub podcast, having us out there, having so many different people who have reached out, so many people who are interested in reviews, so many people who are interested in just film coming from the horror side of things. And I think, again, it just shows you how appreciative and dedicated these horror communities are. I mean, it really is something where it's kind of a special subculture that we have of people who are very, very fanatical about these movies. So when you kind of picture the community style of things, that horror community, again, really is one that's just extra active. Do you have any thoughts about how horror in general, in my opinion, produces the best fans?
No, it really does. And I really like horror people because they're very passionate. And they're very excited to be a part of this process. whether it's just leaving a review, downloading and watching it, spreading the word. We've met a lot of people, like you said, just by making movies, people just are interested in the process. And I kind of really like where the indie scene is right now with the directors and the filmmakers who make multiple movies a year. It's really cool to follow their progress. You can see their growth over movies and get better, and they make more movies. And it's kind of cool. Like, it's just a cool progression to see, which is why we always recommend you make more movies so you can kind of get better and you can kind of figure out, what you want to do as a filmmaker. But the horror fans, they're great. I mean, just everything's been, a joy. And really, before Girl and Cabin 13, I don't think we had the ability to kind of get our stuff out there as much as we do now. But I mean, the people who review Forest of Death, we had that crazy YouTube video that someone made about the movie, which is wild. The press releases on all our stuff now is really cool, but just the feedback we had, we gave a survey to a found footage group to get feedback on A Cold Grave. Usually just ask them questions that bother me, whether or not I made the right decisions, whether or not, we should move in a different direction. And the feedback was phenomenal. And we're going to take that if we make a sequel to A Cold Grave, if we revisit that project again. I now have, I think there are 50, 60 responses of how to make that a better movie. Things that we need to go in a certain direction or things that we need to remove and fix up. But all that stuff is extremely valuable. It comes from people who are extremely passionate about horror. They want to see good horror, and they're excited to give, feedback and watch you grow as well.
Gotta love the horror folks. I mean, they really just want you to succeed, and we love it. So that being said, I think we want to kind of shift into what we're seeing with the studios that are pulling away with this. And I think we've mentioned two that we're going to hop into. And I'd like to discuss their different styles, because I do think they have two different styles. That is our beloved A24 and Blumhouse. I do think Blumhouse, in my opinion, is the extra goat in the sense of just how awesome his development and his processes for it. I like horror movies better than some of the, psychological thrillers or whatever A24 wants to tag those ones. So I'm a little bit biased in that one too. But both of these communities are actually, or both of these studios are actually looking to their community. A24, I would say, actually engages their community a lot better than Blumhouse does, but I think Blumhouse just understands their community so much more. So do you want to kind of talk about how A24, whether it is all of these, press passes that you mentioned, that kind of artsy veil they like to throw over everything to just kind of add it to where it's like, oh, if you're really a film person, you like our movies, which is a great premium model to lean into. And then Blumhouse, just knowing, I feel like they're not as engaging, I would say, as A24, but no one knows their fan base better than Blumhouse. So what are your thoughts on those two statements?
Yeah, I think A24's community is people who like, films that are unique and they're kind of, out there, they're artsy. And there's people who love that stuff. I do like some of it. So that is a community, and A24 knows their community. And I give A24 a lot of credit. Some of the most original stuff that's come out in probably the last 10 years, probably the only original stuff has come from A24. They're very good at starting new concepts, new trends, ideas that we've never seen before. They're really unique. And they know that their audience wants that kind of stuff. And I think that they do a really good job. It's going to be interesting to see A24 post this giant merger that they're about to do. They're really expanding all their stuff. And I believe they bought the rights to Halloween, or they got outbid maybe, but I think that they have some part of it, which will be their first purchase of, I think, larger IP. But I'll have to double check that. I saw some rumors, but I didn't know if it went through. But they are expanding, and it's going to be interesting to see whether or not they can keep this quality, this original content, and obviously make sure their shareholders and stockholders are happy at the same time. Blumhouse just knows their audience. They know how to get these things done. They can crank out the movies. And I think they're kind of two opposites at the one end of the spectrum, where A24, they really try and get unique quality movies in there that are very marketed, very specific on who they target, where Blumhouse has wide mass appeal but you know, the downside and the harshness on Blumhouse is basically these are generic movies. He's not really creating anything new. He's kind of, like you said, playing it safe a little bit. But I mean, like, come on, man. Blumhouse is an absolute animal. When he works with James Wan, is fantastic. And yeah, I'll tell you what, you can tell, or not James Wan, but you can tell Blumhouse's involvement in a project because those movies are usually the better movies. That man is an absolute film savant. And, you know, I think people, when they see something that's mainstream, I think people already like, oh, well, if everybody likes it, I don't like it. And it's just like, all right, man, like, come on. But it's the opposite with A24. It's like, all right, you don't like it. Well, you just don't understand film. It's like, you can't say that to people, but that's what happens. So I think that's too interesting. It's two unique companies with two different perspectives, but both do absolute work and they're phenomenal. And I'm extremely happy to have product coming from both of those, from both Blumhouse and A24.
Again, gotta shout out the ones doing it. I mean, really, a lot of respect to both of them. A little bit more to our Jason Blum out there. That being said, I think I wanted to kind of talk about how it still pales in comparison to what we're doing. You know, I really do think that we are ahead of the curve. You know, I haven't seen anyone kind of doing this type of concept. I think the only type of thing that I see are like really successful streamers potentially that are engaging their community as much as we are right here. But even then, it's not anywhere near as much as what we're doing. So I think it's really, really interesting, you know, if we kind of took the opposite approach to it, which is, you know, most studios will make movies and, you know, have to get to such a large size. Hopefully they get the IP, hopefully they create something, and then hopefully people build a community around what they made, such as, you know, a Star Wars, a Marvels, a superhero, any of that stuff, and it kind of naturally happens. I would say we are proactively building our community each and every time. One, being able to work with us when it comes to being part of these projects, which will only continue to scale and grow. Right now, 63 roles have been cast this year alone when it comes to our movies from the Discord community. Because when you go to these movies, again, I think one of the reasons why Five Nights is doing so well is this is kind of a 10-year, almost 10 years, because it came out in August of 2024, for people who have been fans of Five Nights to kind of get a payoff and to, you know, get this payoff of, wow, I was part of this community. I did all this stuff and now I can just simply watch it, but let me support it by watching and dressing up. This is the next level where, you know, what's the level of support we're going to get when this is a movie that you were made, that was part of you, that you contributed to, that you were actually in person for, that you were being part of. And I think when you look at that, and one way that they did it, so there's the game theorist guy who, again, I played the first night at Five Nights at Freddy's. I do not like scary games. There's something about having pop scares that I just do not enjoy. So when it first came out and everyone was talking about it on YouTube or whatnot, I was like, oh, let me, you know, take a look at this game. Could not make it past the first night. I was absolutely done with it. And I was like, this is, you know, terrifying. I'm never going to do it. Bunch of YouTube people ended up picking it up. I did end up watching like 8 hours of the game theorists about going into the detail, which is where you learn about how gnarly the actual plot is. But what they did is they gave him an on-screen cameo. So that, I think his name's like Mike Platt or something, Mike Pat, or I'm butchering it right now. Please forgive me. But basically the guy that did all the game theories for Five Nights at Freddy's, they gave him 2 lines in the movie. And after that, I didn't even notice it during the movie, but then I saw it on TikTok. When he showed up on screen, the entire audiences throughout the entire nation that were Five Nights at Freddy's fans were cheering. There's also a song by Living Tombstone that's like a Five Nights at Freddy's hit that they played at the end of the credits. And those two things, like I said, there's a lot of nods to the community, but those two things caused people to react so positively because they felt like they were part of it. And I think with our model, when we're actually making people part of these features, and as we continue to grow and scale, and if we can continue to build on this, you're just going to get such an amazing reaction from that when it is that person that you know, that you love hanging out with, that you're seeing on screen. So you want to kind of talk about how it becomes, instead of, you know, you just being part of the ecosystem so much that you like it, that you are now actually part of it and working towards something. So I think, again, as we're scaling up, it's going to be a little bit slower, but I just think this is really how you build it doesn't matter if it's a specific IP, Five Nights at Freddy IP, it's not like they're going to go to Blumhouse and go all their other IPs. Maybe they're horror fans or whatnot. But I think with this is if you do it correctly, which is what we're trying to do, you now have a DBS community where everything that is DBS made becomes supported by a said community.
Yeah, I think people just want to have a part of the movie, or they want to feel invested in it. They want to feel that they've contributed to the movie in some sense. Whether or not that's just doing a super fans premiere and then getting the feedback, and then like, look, some people mention things and I fixed them. That's kind of cool. If you're a fan of this movie, you watched it, you saw something in there, and you're like, hey, I didn't like this, or can you change this? Or I spotted something, we made those changes. I think that person feels invested. But I still think we're really in the infancy of this. I think that, eventually when we start to look into more theatrical releases, doing our Discord showing at live movie theaters across the country would be really cool. That'd be one way to do it. Just more people involved in person would be really cool. Having our own haunted houses, having our own events. Like there's just a lot of stuff that we can really tap into where we're not just making movies, we're kind of building worlds. And I think that that's really cool. We've talked about it before, having like a hotel with all our movie themes, a bar with movie themes in there as well, just to kind of reward, our audience. Movie theaters that are themed after, the stuff that we're making would be really cool. And the in-person stuff, I'm a big fan of Halloween Horror Nights. I feel like there just needs to be a little bit more love involved with some of this stuff and creating this stuff, because the real true horror fans, they see the details, they understand, what's going on, and they like to see that kind of stuff. But it's really cool to me to, one day have the ability to be like, hey, if you like this movie, here's a haunted house, here's a drink that we made from this. Come watch the movie for free if you're a super fan before anyone else does. Let's get your feedback on it right there. And we'll come out to the movie theaters and we can pull people, right there in the movie theaters. All that stuff is really cool. And, it's where we're going to trend to. But, like I said before, it's one step at a time. And the one step this year was make 4 movies in a year. And, we should be able to get there. So then next year is like, all right, how do we increase the community? We've got the production scaled up. How do we, scale up the community? And then once we get the numbers from the community, all right, it's like, how can we reward the community? So you're looking at a 3-year plan right now, but, we're headed in the right direction, just one step at a time.
Exactly that. And I think the last thing I want to talk about is the strength of having a community like that, because to me, it opens up so many more opportunities. One of the ones I absolutely love gaming. I think a game studio, if you had a built-in community, you could easily do pop scares. I can see Carl being a great pop scare and a girl in Cabin 13 simulator. But basically, all forms of art that we have out there when it comes to just creating different things. And I think that's what I love about the Discord right now. We have a lot of amazing people creating a lot of great things, but that's basically what you saw with the Five Nights at Freddy's community. Like again, it's like Scott Carworth or Conworth or something, that creator of it. Realistically, when he was making that game, I don't know if you know how the game actually came about, but basically he was trying to make a Christian video game, and one of the characters that he had was really scary and accidentally did a pop scare, and that became the premise for making Chica, which was one of the characters and doing pop scares there. And he threw it together and people absolutely loved his game, and they just loved it and they bought it and it was a success. No way do I think he had any clue that it would be this billion-dollar franchise that it is now, and it kind of developed out of it. But it developed because of the people making lore and content around it. It wasn't the creator themselves pushing it. It was the lore that got created from all of the content creators around it, all of the YouTube people around it, that made it what its life is. And I think having that unique community element to what we create, we already have. I have right behind me, you got a whole bunch of the Carl fan arts and stuff like that. And we're on such a tiny, tiny scale. So I think what's really cool is when you have a community, you then get that community artwork that takes it, and that community content that takes it to the next level. So do you want to kind of talk about how that then becomes such an engine for DBS when you have multiple people creating part of it and being part of it? And like, this is why I really enjoy this, because I think Five Nights at Freddy's highlights how, again, if you have this model, it becomes so powerful once it grows and scales.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really cool. I love seeing, fan made art and that they create. I definitely think there's going to be, some alternate fan fiction stuff that we can kind of work on as, we make these movies, as we can try to create new concepts. I always try and reward our fans who've watched a lot of our movies. There's a lot of throwbacks for a lot of stuff. A Cold Grave references a lot of other movies in there as well. But I like the fan theories. Some of them are actually pretty funny. And then some of them are actually good to the point where, like, hey, maybe we'll include that stuff. But I think that's just the next step, is like when your communities, as active as they are, if they're contributing, if they're making songs, if they're making fan fiction about your work, if they're, trying different things, as far as like just makeup and prosthetics and stuff like that, we do listen. And if, someone comes up with a really cool idea, we'll collaborate and work with them on, doing this kind of stuff. It's really cool to me. I'm a huge believer in just creative energy and synergy, and really just creating something really cool with a whole bunch of people. And I think the horror genre is a start for us. I think making the movies is a start, but it's not the final medium. It's not the final form of DBS. I think it's just the beginning.
I definitely agree. And I think, really the last thing I want to kind of mention about that is, I think the biggest thing that I see is going to be the difference between DBS and some of these other studios when they're not embracing this is, really what they're providing now, even at like the Five Nights at Freddy's level, is yes, we acknowledge your community and we acknowledge your lore. And here you go. We put the thing in there. Congratulations. There you go. Consume it. And I think what's really going to be special with DBS is the opportunities that arise to, again, be part of these projects. But ideally, as we scale, others scale. Again, I've talked about it multiple times before, but the ideal version of DBS would have multiple production teams, multiple opportunities, and nothing would make me happier than someone in our community has some amazing IP out there. And, as we scale and develop, and they have their own thoughts through our workshops and through our means of developing it, we then have a potential and possibility to work with them and create something that then becomes something special, providing that opportunity. And I think that's going to be the difference. Is I think more and more as you kind of develop, and I think you're seeing it more so with TikTok and how active and interactive the lives are. You're seeing it on streams. But I think more and more as we develop as a community, and as, just business in general develops as a community, I think consumers are going to start asking, well, what do I kind of get out of this? And I think the pure opportunities that DBS can provide for people who either want to be in these movies, be behind the scenes, see how these movies works, again, do super fan events. Again, imagine if they did a Five Nights at Freddy's super fan event where you got to go and see the animatronic. Like, to me, they're just leaving so much on the plate there for what they're actually doing. And I think that's when the fun stuff really happens, to where we're providing these opportunities. So the more you support our community, the more opportunities you make for everyone. So you kind of want to talk about how that scale is. And again, how, again, A24, Blumhouse are doing it great. I think they're leaving so much on the table for us once we scale up too.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal. I think there's just a lot of stuff that we can do, a lot of creative stuff. Video games, movies, live entertainment will probably be the three pillars of DBS. I just don't agree with just stopping after just doing movies. So I mean, we're just gonna get there. Everything's different. I think movies will be one of the harder things we can tackle, just because of how crazy this process is. But we're getting better with each one. This year's been absolutely fantastic. Our community is absolutely fantastic. And we're just gonna continue to work. And that's, when it happens, it happens. But we're getting closer with each movie. Like I said before, each movie is a lottery ticket. We kind of scratch it off. We do the best we possibly can with our low budget, and with the time that we have allocated, and we take this movie, we put it out to the world, and then we make another one. And that's just what we're going to continue to do. And super thankful, super grateful for everyone who watches these movies, who provides feedback, who follows our journey as we get better. But that's pretty much it. I love you guys.
Same. Again, we're growing, we're doing this, and I mean, I think you can see the success in communities like Five Nights at Freddy's. They got to do their victory lap, in the sense of the box office. Blumhouse was paying attention, capitalized on it, but he gave the community what they wanted. And that's really what we're here for. So as we continue to scale, as we continue to grow, that's going to be a top priority for us. But huge shout out to Blumhouse, huge shout out to all of the other horror enthusiasts and the Five Nights at Freddy's crowd, because again, you are showing that movies are alive, intact, and there's a lot to do. That's going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. Be sure to take a look at our movie online, Horror in the Forest. If you give it a rent and a review, it means the world to us. And also be sure to take a look at our Discord channel online, because we make movies for our fans, with our fans. And if you want to be part of the movie making process, that is the place to be. So until then, have a good one, my friends.